David Hume was one of the most important philosophers to write in the English language. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, and spent his childhood in his family's modest estate in the border lowlands. David, along with his older brother, went to Edinburgh University at the age of about 10 or 11 years old, where he studied Latin and Greek, read widely in history and literature, ancient and modern philosophy. He also did mathematics and natural philosophy, which we all know as natural science today. The education that David received was aiming to train pupils to a life of virtue regulated by stern Scottish Calvinist strictures. Prayers and sermons were eminent aspects of his home and university life. David Hume was a scholar and a philosopher who followed a rigorous program of reading and reflecting for 3 years before moving to France, where he could live for cheaper expenses. Here, he read French and other continental authors. During his time in France, he had not only rejected religious beliefs, which he was raised with, but opposed to organized religion in general, which is an opposition that remains constant throughout his life. He earned the reputation of being an atheist and skeptic, which cost him positions he applied for, like the chair of ethics and pneumatical philosophy at Edinburgh. He became a secretary to his cousin, Lieutenant General James St. Clair, whom he accompanied on an extended diplomatic mission in Austria and Italy. Hume was offered to serve as a librarian to the Edinburgh Faculty of Advocates, which gave him the opportunity to begin another project using the law library's excellent resources. Even when he was a librarian, his reputation as an atheist and skeptic dogged him. In the year 1763, David Hume became the private secretary to a British ambassador to France, and during his 3-year stay in Paris, he became secretary to the embassy, and eventually its chargé d'affaires. After 6 years, Hume then returned to Edinburgh, where he built a house in Newtown and spent a considerable amount of time revising his works for new editions of his essays and treatise. In 1775, he was diagnosed with intestinal cancer and passed away a year later. Philosophers recognize David Hume as a thoroughgoing exponent of philosophical naturalism, a precursor of contemporary cognitive science, and an inspiration for several of the most significant types of ethical theory that was developed in contemporary moral philosophy. His works are more conservative contemporaries, which denounce his writings as works of skeptic and atheism. He was a historian and essayist who was a master stylist in any genre. His major philosophical works remain widely and deeply influential, like A Treatise of Human Nature, the inquiries concerning human understanding, and concerning the principles of morals.
Passions, or that which we now refer to as emotions, sensations, as well as needs and wants nowadays, are impressions instead of insights. Authentic, vibrant, and alive conceptions that aren't duplicated from many more conceptions according to Hume's theory of mind. His direct passions, which also include eagerness, reluctance, hope, terror, despair, and delight, are those that arise immediately from good or evil, from pain or pleasure, that we recognize or reckon about ahead of time. But he also includes a few intuitions of uncertain causes, such as physical impulses and yearnings that tend to come to those we adore, and abuse that arises, where it does not continue from discomfort and enjoyment. Hume was indeed usually perceived as a behavior to achieve regarding liberation as well as casualty, since he contends in his dialogue in the inquiry concerning human understanding that if society thoroughly comprehends the philosophies of independence and imperative,
David
Hume's moral sense theory is about how he believes that the moral distinction is the product of a moral sense. In my perspective, he believes that our view in the distinction between good or bad behavior is what a moral sense gives us, the ability to decide which is which. He also claims that if a reason is not responsible for our ability to differentiate moral goodness from badness, then there must be some other capacity of human beings that enables us to make moral distinctions. It means that if our decision is not based on our own reasons alone, then we may have another factor in us human beings that helps us distinguish moral goodness from badness. He is also a moral sentimentalist. That means the foundation of our human behavior is affected by our emotions and feelings. David Hume also considers human passion, pain, and anger in affecting the mind and are felt by the mind, thus resulting to be the foundation of reasons. And as Hume puts it in words, reason is out to be the slave of passions and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. He thinks that the reason is a product of how we felt and thinks towards our surroundings, hence we act as how our emotions and feelings think we should.
Why is Hume an empiricist? Hume is an empiricist because he believes that whatever we believe may be eventually linked to experience. Hume takes an empiricist interpretation of the theory because he thinks that any comprehensible philosophical subject must be presented and addressed in terms of senses. He starts with an explanation of perceptions. The empiricist philosophy of Hume held that causes and effects are discoverable not by reason but by experience. He continues by saying that despite having a historical viewpoint, humanity cannot control the direction of the future because the potential for the future far exceeds the limitations of the past. In contrast to conventional priori metaphysics, Hume is advocating an empiricist approach. His empiricism is naturalistic in that it forbids any reference to the paranormal as a possible explanation for human nature.
The self, as defined by Hume, is nothing more than a collection of perceptions that follow one another with a quick pace. This remark implies that the succession of perceptions that we refer to as self is all there is. According to Hume, our senses continue to allow us to perceive new things. These impressions stand out and, in fact, create distinctive personalities. However, because perception is a continuing process, the self might be defined as a collection of perceptions that build upon one another. In other words, if we are not perceiving, we are either dead or asleep, and the self is not there. Despite the differences in perception, they are all connected by the characteristics that define who we are. He also uses the analogy of republic to illustrate the idea of the self. The republic is governed by laws that are always changing and is populated by various individuals at various times, but it nevertheless maintains its identity. Hume explains this as the method by which we attribute our identity to these various and successive senses. David Hume was successful in proving that successive perceptions make up the self. This is because he was able to show how perception changes over the course of our life. Hume's argument is not only true and logical, but also philosophical, since we are ruled by perceptions that change from one place to another according to time and space, and because the mind functions like a theater for various perceptions.